welcome to an exclusive episode of the Monday Morning Learning Podcast. Very excited to have Bhavna Toor as our guest today. Warm welcome and good morning to you, Bhavna. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Ravikant. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Absolute pleasure is ours, Bhavna. So we've got a podcast title for this special episode. It's Leading with Intention, Conscious Choices for Everyday Leadership. Uh, in terms of the themes for this particular podcast with Bhavna, we are looking at from intent to impact, the power of intentional living. We look at soul meets science. The third one is from autopilot to awareness, building a life aligned with our values. Fourth one is the inner compass, making conscious decisions with clarity and purpose. Mindfulness at work, compassionate leadership, and conscious leadership for women rising with grace and strength. So these are the seven themes for the audience, Bhavna. A quick intro so that the audience knows you very well. I see you have close to 1 lakh followers across board, especially on LinkedIn. But for our exclusive audience, let me just quickly go through a small introduction. Uh, Bhavna is a champion of mindful leadership and gender equity. Uh, as a founder and CEO of Shenomics, a pioneering mindful leadership platform, Bhavna Toor is on a mission to create kinder, fairer world, one where women lead with wisdom, workplaces thrive with compassion, and leadership is grounded in clarity and consciousness and purpose as such. In terms of her impact, she's actually trained, mentored, coached over 10,000 women. That's the number, 10,000 women to unlock their leadership potential, partnered with over 250 organizations, including Google, LinkedIn, Target, and Northern Trust, transformed her decade-long finance career in New York and experience as the CEO of the National Social Entrepreneurship Forum into a leadership movement at Genomics. Now, her foundation, MBA in Social Impact from NYU Stern School of Business. She's a certified mindfulness practitioner with a Search Inside Yourself Institute and a positive psychology practitioner trained in Singapore. In terms of her global lens, she lived and worked across 8 countries, including the US, UK, India, and Singapore, offering a cross-cultural view on leadership and growth. And the list goes on and on, Bhavna. Uh, any welcome words before we start off with the questions, Bhavna?
I'm very happy to be here and to talk about a subject that I know can make a measurable difference to anyone's life who's listening today. So I'm excited to dive right in.
Absolutely, Bhavna. Let's kick off with the first theme. So, from intent to impact, the power of intentional living. Couple of questions for you, Bhavna. In a world flooded with distractions and expectations, how can one consistently make conscious choices that align with their deeper values? That's question one. And what are some subtle but powerful shifts you observe in people who begin to live with intention, even in the smallest daily decisions, according to you?
Yes, thank you so much for beginning with this question. Here's what I would say to your first question, Ravikant, in terms of how can we consistently make choices that align with our deeper values? In my experience, and with everything that I've studied and practiced, I think the easiest and at the same time, the most powerful way to do this is to begin with one question. And that question, Ravikant, is what is the kind of person that I would like to become? What is the kind of human? What is the kind of leader? What is the kind of mother, the father, um, colleague, friend, however you want to define it? But fundamentally, when you think about who you are, what is the kind of person that you would like to become that will give you a deep sense of pride as well as fulfillment? And I'm not asking what would you like to do. So this is not a doing question, but who would you like to be? This is a being question. And what you find, Ravikant, is in the process of answering this question, you will be challenged to think deeply about what are your most cherished values, because you cannot answer the question, what is the kind of person I would like to become, without really shining a spotlight on what do you fundamentally value. And in the because then when you're defining yourself, you can answer that question in light of your values. And for example, you may say, the kind of person that would give me great pride would be to become a person who's always kind, who always shows up with courage, the courage to do the right thing. The kind of person who always brings a calm presence with her everywhere she goes. So when you begin with that question, Ravikant, then when it comes to your daily decisions and daily choices, you now have a North Star, and you can gauge any choice or decision with respect to how it stacks up or how it orients towards that North Star. So if it's, should I do X or should I do Y? Well, which one is more likely to help you become who you wish to become than any doing based choice or decision? Should I do this or not? How should I show up in this decision? How should I show up in this meeting? How should I interact with a certain individual? How should I design my day? What habits should I practice? All of these questions become so much easier to answer when you've given yourself that North Star of what kind of person do I wish to become. So that would be my biggest encouragement to anyone who's listening to this. And when you start to do this, and this answers your second question, Ravikant, when you start to do this, you will start to notice so many tangible shifts in yourself, beginning with how you feel on the inside. When you're showing up with greater intention, when you're showing up more consciously, you'll find you have so much more clarity inside. You have so much more greater peace of mind inside as well, because you know deep down that every choice, every action of yours is deeply aligned with what matters most to you. And when that happens, when you're living with that kind of deep alignment, you rely less and less on external validation. You rely less and less on essentially anything external for your sense of confidence, for your sense of self worth, for your sense of fulfillment. So that's the biggest shift that I've seen even with your interactions with others, because there is this clarity and peace of mind that you take with you everywhere you go. You realize even in your interactions with others, you would be less reactive but more responsive. You'll be more compassionate. You connect more deeply with others. You'll be more present with others. Even in your language, you'll start to notice subtle shifts. For example, and this in fact is one of the choices I give people in my book and in our work, which is instead of saying I have to do something, like I have to go to the gym today, I have to help my child with his homework today, or I have to pay my taxes today, which really makes you feel a lot of it feels very burdensome. And when you shift the language to I choose to, I'm choosing to go to the gym today because I value my health. I'm choosing to spend time um, with my son, helping him with his homework because I believe in a better future for him. I'm choosing to prioritize X over Y because I know that would be better aligned with the kind of leader that I envision myself becoming. So those are some thoughts, Ravigan, that
Mm,
I would share.
absolutely. Thank you so much. I actually missed the chance of seeing you live back in Hyderabad when you were here. And the next question is linked to that. And you actually talk to a lot of leaders in the corporate, and it's a ruthless kind of a competitive environment over there. And what you talk of in terms of having a North Star and the kind of language which you need to actually use, the choose is one of the words you are recommending. How do you see it play in the corporate? Because the environment is very difficult. It's a kind of layoff environment across the board if you look at it. How do you think leaders can actually choose the right words and also come up with a kind of a North Star in this kind of environment, Bhavana, according to you?
I think, Ravikant, when you do begin with clarifying the kind of person you wish to become, it also gives you clarity around the kind of leader you wish to become, because who you are in one area of your life is who you are everywhere. There's no separating, oh, this is who I'll be in this context and who this is who I'll be in the workplace. Who you are is who you are. So by bringing clarity to the kind of values that you wish to live with, and therefore by extension wish to lead with, it brings a lot of clarity around the kinds of decisions you can make in the workplace as well. And what I've seen, including you mentioned a recent event that we did in Hyderabad, and what we heard from the leaders that we had on the panel discussion in Hyderabad around conscious and compassionate leadership, is that these were a set of leaders because they were so mindful about the kind of values they wish to express in their work, in their leadership. It was easier for them to balance decisions, keeping those two competing demands in mind. That, yes, on one hand, I mean, like you said, it's the nature of the corporate environment. You do need to focus on results, you do need to focus on performance, you do need to focus on outcomes. And that is fine. That is absolutely fine. But what kind and compassionate leaders do, and I've seen this repeatedly, time and time again, is they realize that the way to get to those results and those outcomes is by valuing, deeply and fundamentally valuing the people, their teams who create those results. And how you value those people is by creating that kind and compassionate environment for them where they can show up authentically, where they can support each other. And because they're so cherished and valued, they find that inner motivation and drive to deliver and, in fact, exceed what is expected of them.
Absolutely, Bhavna. Thanks so much. So, moving to the second theme of soul meets science and integrating ancient wisdom with modern neuroscience. Now, this is regarding your book. So, it blends timeless spiritual principles with evidence-backed strategies. And question is, how did you strike that balance between soul and science? That's the first question. And what ancient practices do you find most relevant in today's leadership context, especially during emotionally complex moments, Bhavna?
Yeah, again, great question. And you're right. This is something, striking that balance between ancient wisdom and modern science is something that I have done very intentionally in my book, because that's also something I've done very intentionally in my body of work over the last 10 years. So, ancient wisdom for me is the foundation, because that is the thing that has allowed me to live so much more intentionally and so much more consciously. And now when you bring that philosophy or those ideas into the workplace, I think it's important that you also apply that filter of modern science as well, because otherwise you will meet people who would be relatively skeptical of just purely
Yeah.
ancient ideas and principles. And fortunately, a lot of ancient wisdom is validated now by modern research and modern science. And just to give you a very small example, and I think this speaks to your second question as well, what's a small practice that anyone can practice, whether it's in the workplace or anywhere? A small practice that we can all incorporate is what I like to call a conscious pause, or you can also call it a mindful pause. And the more you incorporate these pauses into your day, the more you'll find instead of reacting, you will respond to the situations and the people around you. Viktor Frankl has, who a very famous author and psychotherapist who had written this book called Man's Search for Meaning, has this beautiful quote in his book that I love, which goes along the lines of, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies your power to choose. And in that power to choose lies your growth and your freedom. And I feel like that quote, in a nutshell, really describes conscious living and conscious leadership. The idea is to create more spaces between, like he said, the stimulus and the things that trigger us on a day-to-day basis so that we can respond more thoughtfully. And in that space also, really take back our power and our freedom to be able to do so. How can you create these pauses? And this is where ancient wisdom supported by science comes in. Two simple practices that I can offer you, Ravikant. One
Sure.
is just your breath. Every time you just pause to take a breath, whether that pause is just before you're entering a meeting or even in the meeting, if you find yourself getting triggered and you just need a moment to collect yourself and your thoughts, just that one breath can allow you to respond and make better decisions. And of course, ancient wisdom says the same thing, which is that it's between it's the space between two thoughts where true awareness really lives.
Right.
And we know also now modern science tells us when you create that space, such as through your breath, you're now thinking much more from your prefrontal cortex, which is the executive center of your brain, which allows you to make more thoughtful and rational decisions. So your breath is one easy one. The second one is, and again, ancient wisdom has always told us that going for a walk, especially in nature, is such a powerful way to calm the mind and connect with something bigger than yourself. And now modern science is telling us with the examples of multiple leaders, including, most famously, I can cite Steve Jobs, who was a big believer in the power of walking as a way to just clear the mind and clear your thoughts. And modern science supports this. In fact, just a simple walk, a 10 to 15-minute walk, can increase your creativity by 40%. So that's huge because you're clearing away the clutter from your mind, which allows more thoughts more productive thoughts to emerge, and you start to see the connections more clearly as well.
Absolutely. I think I can link to each and everything you're saying, Bhavna. These morning walks I had around 45 minutes helps a lot to calm myself down and draws a map for the entire day. So I can actually link to that. And Steve Jobs, I think one of the books he loved was the autobiography of a yogi. And I remember once he passed away, I think he ensured that everyone who came actually was gifted that particular book. One of the questions which I had, basically a bit curious, you talk about ancient wisdom. Are you linking up with any scriptures? Because the mindfulness breathing you talk about is something which Patanjali actually, in the sutras, it's there. So are you linking it to any scriptures or is it generic kind of knowledge that you're looking at?
When it comes to ancient wisdom, Ravikant, one thing I'm a big believer in is taking the best from various timeless traditions around the world. So even in my book, I have ideas from Stoicism. I have ideas from Sufism, or of course Hinduism, Buddhism. So I am very secular in my approach. What I'm because as an individual, if I was to be completely honest, I'm not a very religious person. I in fact I don't tie myself to any one religion in particular, but I'm deeply spiritual. And what I'm always looking for as a conscious leadership practitioner is, again, I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for what are the commonalities, what are the things that all of these ancient traditions are telling us
Mm.
that has stood the test of time and now has stood the test of science as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that, Bhavna. So, moving on to the next one, we're looking at from autopilot to awareness, building a life aligned with values. Now, have there been moments in your journey where you realized you were operating on autopilot, and what helped you course correct? That's question number one. And what rituals or practices do you personally use to stay anchored to your values during high stakes decisions, Bhavna?
So have I been living on autopilot? Absolutely, yes. Even now, there are many times when I do find myself living on autopilot, although I come back to that present moment with a lot more awareness now. I think that's the difference. But certainly, if I was to look at the first decade of my career, I was living and working in New York, working in finance for a leading investment firm, and by all measures, on the surface, my life looked very successful. But I don't think I was very grounded necessarily because I just found myself, I was constantly running, trying to prove myself always, trying to prove that I'm good enough, that I can be impressive enough to earn praise or validation from others. So there was a deep sense of insecurity inside me as well. I wasn't, and this is the time in my life where I don't think I was living with a lot of intention because I wasn't anchored within. I was so searching for validation outside, and it was only when I finally, I think, towards the end, after a decade-long career in finance and after completing my MBA, um, I think that was for the first time in my life, I decided I'm going to take a different turn, take my life in a different turn, and because I could see the toll it was taking on me to just aimlessly, or what felt like aimlessly, to be running. And so I decided I'm actually going to take a pause. And so I made a decision at the time, which was very dramatic, but now looking back, was the best decision I made, which is to move to India.
Oh,
And so that, and there were two reasons for that. One was, of course, a more spiritual reason to just go off on this exploration to really understand better who I am and what could my unique and authentic path in life be. And I felt I needed the time and space to be able to answer that question. But also professionally, I felt I could come to India and experiment with different initiatives that I had in mind, especially in the space of social entrepreneurship at that time, which eventually led me to founding Shenomics, the company that I've been leading for the last decade. So that was I think that was a decision that finally, really for the first time in my life, because I made a decision to look more inwards rather than always searching for answers outside of me.
yeah.
It slowly started to help me really live from that, create that awareness, and then live from that awareness. So I think yes, that's definitely one example I can give you. And in terms of now on a day to day, what helps me, and this is something I'd love to share as a tool for anyone who's listening to this or watching this. And in fact, I have my journal right in front of me, which I can give you as an example. One of the things that I do on a daily basis is I um, I track. I track a number of different things that I want to practice every day. But specifically to your question, one of the things that I put on my daily tracker is the values that I want to practice. So, so if I was to pull my journal here.
Sure.
I have courage, kindness, and presence on my tracker. And every day, it's for me, this serves as a reminder that these are the things that I need to really keep front of mind and, top of mind always. And when you do this, for anyone who's listening to this and you want to try this, I urge you to try something similar. Ask yourself, what is that one value or one quality you want to practice every single day that will help you become the kind of person you wish to become? And every day, either in the morning or in the evening, ask yourself. In the morning, maybe you ask yourself, how can I practice this value today? And maybe in the evening, it's a reflection of, how did I practice this value today? And if I didn't, how can I practice it the following day? That one reflection alone will bring so much more intentionality into how you show up every day.
Couple of questions. I'm very curious by nature, so I'm going off script. Excuse me for that. The first thing I'm very curious is the fact that I was having this conversation with Nidhi Pratapneni, one of our pro bono leaders, a part of our Monday Morning Learning podcast. So when I said that, I'm actually interviewing Bhavna Toor, she was very excited. She's based out of Singapore. She
Oh,
said, Bhavna is, he has built up a brand. It is very, very, very difficult in this particular country to build up a great brand. You should actually ask her journey in terms of how exactly she was able to achieve it. So I know you came to India from New York, uh, and then build up She Economics and build up your global brand. Can you take us through? Just take it 2 or 3 minutes. Help us understand how the journey was, because it's not an easy journey from what I understand. And people over there who are listening to this would love to know how you have actually created a global brand, Bhavna.
lovely question. So I think in terms of how do you build a brand, or a brand that can then have an impact on a larger and larger level, whether it is, within your, beginning with your community, maybe your organization, and then going then within your industry, and then, globally. It of course happens over time. Again, I would say, here, let me, and in order to just make it also very practical for anyone who is listening to this and wants to know how they can do it themselves. Again, I will urge you to go back to that same question I began this conversation with, is ask yourself, what are the values that this ideal version of you expresses? Because then those also become your brand values. And for any brand to be deeply impactful and even resonant with the right kind of audience that it's trying to attract, you need to be very clear about what it is that you stand for.
Yeah.
That's the only way people who are listening to you or watching you or reading something you have written, that's the only way that they will be able to decide, is this a brand I can relate to? Is this a brand that inspires me? Is this a brand that I want to have a relationship with? So I think that's the first question. And the second question is, Ravikant, and this is something I'm a big believer in, and something that I've done very intentionally, and I encourage and guide people in our programs to do intentionally as well, is you want to think about those values and ask, what does this value look like in action? What does this value look like in action? And then talk about that.
Mm.
Talk about that, because that's integrity. When you're not just saying you believe in something, but you're also translating it into your daily actions and behaviors. That's true integrity, and that's inspiring. So, for example, for me, and I'll just give you one or two simple examples. For me, what it means to live consciously is also in how I, even a small decision like my clothing, for instance. So 6 years ago, I made a decision that I could see that this, being on an endless consumption cycle was just starting to take away my peace of mind.
mm,
And so I just decided one day, all right, I think I'm just going to stop shopping, and I'm just going to see how I can make the most of whatever I have, and just appreciate that and use that and reuse that in creative ways.
mm,
So I made that decision, and then for the next 6 years after that, only recently, I ended the shopping fast because I had to replenish a few things. But for 6 years, I did not shop, and I would talk about this journey
mm.
actively, whether
Yeah.
it's on social media, whether it's in my talks, in my programs, and more than anything. Uh, I still there are still women who come up to me and tell me that, this is something that they were deeply inspired by, and they started to make similar choices as well. They started testing and experimenting how long they could go without buying something, especially with clothing. And that's how I think, over time you start to attract people, like-minded people, especially in your community, because you're very clear, like I said, about what you stand for,
Yeah.
and then you proactively talk about that journey of translating those values into action through all of your work.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Bhavna. There's one more thing I want to prick your brain on. Not off late, but since the last 4 5 years, there's a lot of layoffs actually happening, affecting the 50 plus, age 50 plus people. And a lot of people are actually talking to me. So that's the reason why I'm asking the question. You consciously took a pause, right? And then you actually build up your own brand and highly successful globally. Now, that's not the situation for these people. They're being forcefully moved out of corporates, for example, right? And it's kind of a shock for them, and they're taking their own time. What is the one, two, three, ideas which they can actually work on, which can help them in that particular journey, Bhavna? That'd be helpful for them a lot.
Yeah, in fact, just recently I shared something about this on LinkedIn, this idea of don't attach yourself to a person, a place, or a company, but attach yourself to your passion, your purpose, and your values. Because if you attach yourself very strongly to a company and that company changes, you feel unanchored, not because you're not talented, not because you're not resilient, but you feel unanchored because you had started to define your entire identity and your self-worth based on your association with a particular brand or company, let's say. And when that gets taken away, then it makes you feel like you're losing your sense of self. But if instead you start to consciously define yourself according to your passion. So I am, let's say you say, I am a passionate problem solver, or I am someone who believes in leading with empathy and collaboration, or I am someone who wants to create a uplifting environment for the people around me wherever I go.
Mm,
Whatever that is for you, you need to be able to, with a few words or with one or two sentences, be able to clearly identify again, what is for you that purpose of being, that North Star that defines who you are, irrespective of what are who you're affiliated with or not affiliated with. Then what happens is you start to feel a lot more confident in who you are. And what you also realize, and this is really powerful, is that passion, that purpose, that values, A, no one can take away from you. And B, you can always find other ways of expressing that, through whether in another context or in another organization, or just in your day to day, you can still make a choice to keep showing up with those values, keep expressing what you fundamentally believe. So that, I think, that's definitely one shift I would offer.
thank you. Thank you so much. That will help a lot. Bhavna. So moving to the inner compass, making conscious decisions with clarity and purpose, Bhavna. When you're faced with ambiguity or moral conflict, how do you reconnect with your inner compass? That's question number one. And can you share a moment or moments where you trusted intuition over logic and how that shaped your path?
Um, yes, absolutely. I think when it comes to facing ambiguity or moral conflict, and keep coming back to your inner compass, a very small tool, and I think I share this in my book as well, a small but powerful tool with any decision or choice that you are about to make is to ask yourself, how will I feel about this choice 10 minutes from now, 10 months from now, and 10 years from now? Because often, to come back to our inner purpose, when we're so deeply embroiled in something,
Yeah,
when, whatever that situation may be, when you're so deeply embroiled in something, it's very hard to think clearly. And in that moment, what you need is a way to be able to step back. And step back not just in that moment, but step back in a way that really allows you to see it in perspective. And so this small tool, 10 10 10, the name of the author who had first shared this is escaping me right now.
sure.
Um, but 10 10 10 is a simple tool to be able to just ask yourself in that moment. And it really brings clarity to, because sometimes a decision may feel very convenient right now, but then when you put it into perspective of, but what about 10 years from now? Would I still feel happy or proud that I made this choice? That really, then you really start to pause and think more deeply. And it's interesting. And this actually aligns very well with the framework that Jeff Bezos had once shared as well, and he calls it the regret minimization framework. And it's a very similar approach. What he said is he always imagines, and in any kind of situation, he imagines what the 85-year-old version of him, if that 85-year-old version of him was looking back at the situation he is in now and the decision he's about to make, would that 85-year-old feel proud and at peace with this decision? So again, the same idea. And if I could bring in the ancient wisdom here as well, the Stoics had this beautiful expression called memento mori, which literally translates as remember death. Because the Stoics believed that at any moment, with any choice, with any decision, if you always keep in mind that one day this is all going to end, and you keep that last point in your life in mind, that will guide you to make better decisions today. So yeah, so that is one tool I can offer our listeners. And in terms of your second question, Ravikant, a moment where I trusted intuition over logic, definitely when I decided I would leave New York and move to India, there wasn't so much of a plan that I had or so much of a logical process that led me to decide that, but there was a strong inner knowing that this is the right choice to make for me. So it was largely guided by intuition. So that's definitely one example I can give you. And on a lighter note, on a much lighter note, um, another choice that was for me was hugely guided by intuition is also deciding to marry my life partner. The very first day I saw and I met my now husband, I had this very strong feeling, the strong inner knowing, the strong intuition that this is the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. So I think, and I just want to end with saying we all have this ability to think and act from that inner knowing. And the way you get in touch with that intuition and inner knowing, again, goes back to what we were discussing earlier, is to create more stillness, more pauses
Mm.
in your day to day so that you can be more connected and actually hear what that inner intuition is telling you.
Really advise, Bhavna. I think, normally we have people, or myself, for example, practice meditation maybe in the morning and the night, not over the day. What you're suggesting is a kind of a still point, strategically placed across the day, so that you're continuously in that kind of mode. And when you're disturbed internally, you actually go back and be more stoic, I guess. Right? That's what I understood. Thank you so much for the inspiration there. Now, coming to mindfulness at work, creating space for presence, impact, and growth, Bhavna. How do you consciously create moments of pause? Something which we just spoke about amidst a demanding schedule or during team leadership, and what role does mindfulness play in driving impact in high performance environments? Okay.
So yes, I think the conscious pauses is something that you just very beautifully actually touched upon. And the idea is to create more of those pauses, not just beginning your day with, of course, beginning your day with stillness and a conscious pause is supremely powerful, but also throughout the day, you want to, for example, at the top of every hour, I have this reminder set to just pause and just take a few breaths, even if it's a moment of practicing mindful breathing or just a minute of silence. This is something I've just set as a reminder for myself at the top of every hour.
Yes.
So that's one way to do it. It could be any moment of transition for you, for people. So before your next meeting, just take a minute. Before your next call, before your, next being intentional about inserting these minute long or 5 minute long breaks and pauses throughout your day, I think is one way to stay conscious and mindful and intentional throughout your day. In terms of how this impacts how mindfulness can help high performance environments. There was this one study that was done. Originally, it was done by Google. It was called Project Aristotle, where they studied their highest performing teams. And after studying their highest performing teams, they found out that their best teams had five things in common. And the number one thing that all their best teams had in common was that they had psychological safety. And psychological safety is a concept that has now been very deeply studied and validated by Amy Edmondson at the Harvard Business School as well, which essentially says that in a team, when you have an environment where people can show up, uh, try different things, ask whatever they want to ask, knowing that they're not going to be judged for it,
Yeah.
knowing that they are safe to be themselves and to try different things, that is the kind of environment that most contributes to high performance and innovative thinking. And when I connect that back to compassionate leadership, that is what a compassionate leader is doing. Compassionate leadership is about creating that sense of safety in the team environment where people feel safe to be themselves. People feel safe to share their ideas, ask whatever they wish to ask, and even try different things, knowing that there's space for them to fail.
Absolutely.
So I think high performance and mindfulness and compassion really go hand in hand.
Absolutely. I mean, it reminds me quickly. I was we doing a podcast just a month back with a lady called Saraswati Ramachandra. She is the managing director for a global company called Lightcast, based out of Bangalore in US. So we were talking about innovation and the background, at least for the South Asia region. If you look at it, late 90s is when HSBC and GE came to India, 98, 99, right? From then onwards until 2025, if you look at it, the leaders here have actually grown into managing directors or senior vice presidents, right? Someone who actually was like a assistant manager back in 2000. Now, what they are used to across these 25, 27 years is delivery. So, someone in the US or UK their bosses actually say them, okay, this is the SLA. You need to deliver in this particular thing. These are the kind of SLAs you need to meet. And we are so good in terms of meeting and exceeding. And we've been doing that for a period of 25, 27 years. And suddenly now you ask the same leader who is the managing director of a company to innovate. Now there's no failure for them for 27 years because they're being exceeding. Now, suddenly you need you have to fail. You have to let your people under you actually fail. It's kind of becoming difficult for the leadership. Do you encounter such aspects, especially in the South Asia region? Well,
Yes, no, you're right. I think it all comes down to what are those incentives that are driving leadership behavior and leadership outcomes, and what is celebrated, what is measured, and what is celebrated. And you're right, in traditional environments where the focus is purely on results and outcomes, it and then when you ask people to innovate, it can be very, very difficult because, the structure was built differently. But I think when you shift away from the results and outcomes to more the inputs that go into creating a certain kind of environment. So again, going back to Steve Jobs' example, and this is something, again, this I just discovered recently. One of the questions he would ask his chief design officer. I'm forgetting his first name was, but his last name was Ives. Um, and one of the questions Steve Jobs would ask him is, "What did you say no to today?
uh,
What all did you say no to today?"
mm,
You know, and because the idea was, where Steve Jobs was coming from, and Steve Jobs was a big believer in maintaining, a certain ratio between signal and noise, and keeping the noise to a minimum, and spending 80% of your energy and effort on what really matters, what is the true signal.
yeah,
And that meant to be able to do that meant saying no to the noise, saying no to everything that is not essential. So just by changing that question by which he was measuring performance, he was able to influence how his executive team, his senior team, started to show up. And it was, a big shift for them in that sense. So I think the way we bring about that shift is by being very mindful about what are we measuring, what are we assessing, what are we asking.
absolutely, Bhavna. I think very, very powerful example you share. I think will help a lot of people. Uh, so moving to compassionate leadership in a performance driven world, a couple of questions around how do you balance compassion with accountability when leading teams through pressure or targets? And have you ever chosen empathy over expediency in a leadership moment? And what did it teach you?
Yeah, again, very, very great questions, and very deeply connected to the conversation we've been having thus far on how compassion does play a significant role in creating high performing teams. And what my experience has been, Ravikant, and the research backs this up as well. In fact, at Shenomics, in my company, for years, several years in a row, we did this research where we asked, especially people who are leaving organizations, when they leave, we're very curious to know, especially with women, why do you leave? What causes you to leave? What's the number one thing that causes you to leave one organization and move to another, or leave the workforce altogether? And the number one thing that causes a woman to leave, and I'm sure this may be true for everyone, we know from our research this is certainly true for women, they leave when they feel undervalued. They leave when they feel undervalued. 51% of the women, year after year after year, the numbers didn't really change. They told us they were leaving when they felt undervalued. So, you know, the way you create accountability, the way is, again, by, compassionate trait that you bring to your teams is knowing how, if that's the number one thing as a compassionate leader, you want to ask yourself, how can I make my team feel valued? For me, as a leader, that's the one question I'm always asking for my team. How do I make sure that I keep reminding the people on my team that the work that they're doing matters. It's making a difference. Of course, we're also a very mission driven organization, but I'm constantly looking for ways to remind them that this is how your work makes a difference. This is how your work is furthering our mission of creating a more fair and a kinder and a more equitable world. And when people start to feel that, deeply feel that, and internalize that, accountability by definition almost automatically increases as well, because when you feel that level of pride in your work, you also start to take more ownership, and with ownership comes greater accountability.
Absolutely.
So I think the biggest thing leaders can do, anyone listening to this, please make sure every person on your team knows how and why their work matters and how and why their work is making a difference. They should be absolutely clear about that. So that's I think that's what I would say to your first question. And I think to your second question was around choosing empathy over
Expediency.
yeah, experiencing. I think there, I mean, just the simplest thing that comes to my mind is knowing that, the people we're working with, we, to be able to see them holistically, because we only, to see them holistically and value them holistically, because work is only one aspect, one dimension of their lives. Yes, it's very important, but it's only one dimension of their lives. And so to also value what is happening in their lives outside of work, to
Mm,
show sensitivity towards that, to show empathy towards that. So if somebody, sometimes, I mean, that's just the nature of life. You'll find people who are, let's say, who are taking care of aging parents, or have somebody else in their or pets. I've had people who have been dealing with sick pets as well, or their own health in their own,
mm,
they're struggling with various whatever they may be struggling with. And in those moments, to really, be very intentional about expressing compassion and empathy and giving them the time that they need to rest, to come back to composure, to come back
mm.
to what they need to perform. I think that goes a long way. That goes a long way. It's the easiest way, I think, to show empathy and compassion. And so I think for me as a leader, those are some moments that definitely where I'm trying to be a lot more mindful about giving people space and time, because
Absolutely.
work's never going to stop. Work is always going to be work,
Yeah.
but giving people time and space is very, very important.
Absolutely. Two thoughts triggered, Bhavna. One was an example of one of the leaders that I'm in touch with. He actually headed in a couple of countries for a particular department. And he shared with me in private saying that, he heard from the headquarters that something is going to happen for his team. He actually been asked to move some of the people away from the company or out of the company. And he's actually nurtured the team for 5 to 7 years. He knows in and out. So what he did was, again, coming to the compassionate leadership which you spoke about, inform the team offhand saying that something is coming. Please be ready in the next 6 months in case it happens. And these are the leaders. These are the real leaders, Bhavna. If you look at it, we know how the corporate is. We have to live in the reality of the corporate where layoffs will happen. But we need to be compassionate about it. And the people under him are so grateful that he's actually given time, and it's not on the final day when you've been asked to go with the HR exit interview, but prepare them properly that they actually moved out to different companies and they remain his fancy with now. So that's one thing which I wanted to share. Second thing which I wanted to prick your mind is on identity crisis. I mean, I love the fact that you said there is life beyond the corporate, because if you look at it, without money we can't actually live. That's given. But having said that, at least all the employees of the corporate, if you look at it, they're in fear because they don't know. They step into the office tomorrow morning, they don't know whether they're going to have a job or not. That is the kind of environment they're living in. Now, that is where the identity crisis also is there when they're moved out. Very deep emotional attachment to the particular company that they work with for so long. So we're looking at periods of 15 years, 20 years, sometimes 30 years, actually working in top corporates. I'm talking of Microsoft, Google kind of companies. They've worked so long, established the entire processes, established the business, but still being asked to go. What is your advice? Couple of hints and tips there for them to survive and thrive from an identity crisis point of view.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and I think this Ravikant, this ties back to what we were discussing earlier as well when you asked me a similar question. I think it is about reframing your identity away from your role, which is external and it is given to you, to an identity that is defined by you and that expresses who you are independent of what role you may be in. So, for
Yeah,
example, let's say formally on your resume, you are, a product manager at XYZ company or an engineer at XYZ company. How do you reframe that in a way that defines who you are independent of that role? And like we were discussing earlier, maybe you're saying I'm a creative problem solver. That's my true identity. And if that is your identity, if that is a more lasting identity, then independent of that role, you can always ask yourself, okay, how do I bring this element of creative problem solving to other things, to other, in other facets of my life, or in with other opportunities? Can I create opportunities where I can take this trait, this identity of mine, and use it to create value? So I think it's really about taking your power back by choosing that identity and framing that identity in a way that is within your control and in a way that you can express on a day-to-day basis, independent of what that formal role may be, which can be taken away, as you said.
sure. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I've been in learning and development, so there's something called reiteration, right? So that's the reason why I keep coming back to the similar question, but given it in a different frame as such. So coming
Yeah.
to the final theme of conscious leadership for women, rising with grace and strength, Bhavna. Couple of questions. What unique inner and outer challenges do women face on their leadership journey, and how can organizations truly support them? That's one. And how can women leaders move from proving themselves to simply expressing their authentic presence, according to you?
Um, I think to your first question, the recognition itself that they're both inner and outer challenges is where it begins. Because sometimes what can happen is, and I still see this, where the assumption is that the entire responsibility of, let's say, if there is a gap in leadership, um, the entire responsibility of closing that gap lies on the women alone, and that's not never going to work. There are, yes, as women, we you have to take ownership of working on the inner challenges that you are experiencing, and that's where, at Shenomics, there's a great amount of focus that we place on helping and really supporting women in feeling that strength and that confidence and that clarity from within, so that irrespective of what environment they may be, they feel confident
Mm,
in expressing their leadership. But equally, there is that external element as well. Just to put this into perspective, there's this great definition of confidence that Professor Ian Robertson, who's at the Oxford Business School, came up with, which is that confidence essentially has two components. There's one part that says I can, and so that's very inner driven. I can do this. And then the second piece is to be able to say, and it can happen for me. It can happen. I can do this, and it can happen for me. So for example, even if you take something as simple and as your health, you'll be excited about working on your health goals when you truly believe you can make a difference. But you'll also need to believe that, okay, but if I do XYZ, I will see a change in the metrics that I'm measuring, or I will see a change in the outcomes. This can happen for me. There
Yeah.
are people, who can help me, and there are resources that I can use that will point me in the right direction. And the same is in the workplace.
Mm,
For let's say, as a woman, to be able to apply to a leadership position, yes, of course, one part of you needs to be able to confidently say, even though I only meet 6 out of the 10 things that are necessary for this role,
mm,
I feel confident I can still handle it and I can take it on. But the it can happen for me is also important. I also need to believe that if I take this on,
yeah.
there is, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that there's space for me to leverage help. There is space for me to fail as I'm trying to figure this out. I can lean on people around me for that support, that help, that guidance. And so that external piece is what then leads you to believe it can happen for me. I can see myself as a leader within this organization because of all of these external factors that are playing a role and coming together to make me believe that.
Mm,
So and so that's what we need. We need to be able to work on both fronts. And to your second question as well, in terms of how can women stop proving themselves and start leading from that authentic place? Again, it's both of those things. It's, as a woman, to be able to tell yourself, you know what, I am enough. I am enough. I don't need to keep proving myself. And I know I keep wanting to prove myself because in many ways the environment is, you know in many times it's because of the bias in the environment that makes me feel like I have to prove myself.
yeah.
So yes, to be able to tell yourself that, yes, I can really, I am enough, and therefore I can um, really, with clarity, just operate from that place of awareness of who I am, what's important to me, what is my vision, and from that alignment really express my leadership. Because when I do, that's when I'm going to be a lot more grounded. I am going to show up as that conscious, compassionate leader. And equally, to the extent you can, to mindfully curate your external environment as you're picking roles, as you're picking companies, as you're picking opportunities, to
Mm,
really look for those kinds of environments where there is going to be support for you to show up authentically, where there is going to be that help, that space for you
yes.
to try and fail.
No, absolutely. I'll link this to the same episode where I was interviewing the managing director, Saraswati. She mentioned the fact that she has created an ecosystem over a period of 20 years, right? Friends, leaders at different kind of places. And whenever she's cornered into something, there are 10 people that she can actually call up for a varied kind of opinion. And then she goes forward over there. So very rightly put, I can connect to what you're saying. Thank you so much, Bhavna. Finally, one question. If there's one conscious choice you believe every leader should make daily, what would that be and why?
I think if there's one conscious choice that every leader can make daily, is to begin their day with stillness. Create a small conscious pause. So before you reach for your phone, before you start reacting to the world around you and the multiple demands that may be on you, even if it's 5 minutes, to just, whether you're sitting in silence or you're choosing to meditate or you're choosing to journal, to just create that conscious pause and ask yourself, what would the wisest version of me do today? Or how would the wisest person or version of me show up today? And see what answer you get and lead from that place.
Absolutely, Bhavna. Thanks so much. I think I had an overall goal and objective for this particular podcast. I think you are 100% met the objective. We actually wanted to explore how leaders can transition from autopilot behavior to intentional action, shaping a leadership style grounded in self-awareness, values, and presence. And the goal is basically to help listeners reflect on their own choices, reconnect with their inner compass, and discover how mindfulness, compassion, and clarity can fuel sustainable impact both personally and professionally. I think through the stories and reflections, you actually helped shine on how to lead with purpose, grace, and courage in an increasingly complex world, Bhavna. Thanks so much, for spending close to an hour or more today with me on the Monday Morning Learning podcast. There were a couple of questions off script because I was able to connect to each and everything which you were saying. So I shared examples of the leaders that I actually spoke with. So excuse me over there, but how was the experience like? You give me feedback in terms of how this went.
It was amazing. I thought your questions were very thoughtful, and definitely keeping in mind what are the practical realities and challenges that your listeners, leaders and organizations, or any professional may be wrestling with in the modern day. I thought that was very well framed, and it was very interesting for me to see you connect the dots between, let's say, something I said or something another person that you've interviewed in another podcast has said. I always like to see where the dots connect with the thoughts of other thinkers and leaders as well. So that was very, very wonderful for me to hear.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think this last 30-second compliment of yours, I think I'll market myself saying that this is what Bhavna Toor told me. Thank you so much for today, Bhavna. I think I'll connect again maybe 6 months from now with
Yeah.
another burning topic, Bhavna, depending on your time. But thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.